Hi everyone, welcome back to the part 2 and the final part of the making of the Dartless cap corset. If you haven't already seen part 1, which is the drafting process, I advise you to do so. I'm going to leave a link right under this video so it's easy for you. Without much further ado, let's get straight into it because this is going to be a very long video. Let's get started. My patterns are all ready and I'm going to set the body aside, and I'll start with my cap first. Okay, so with the cap I have A, B and C. So I have 4 pieces of each. So with A I have 4 pieces, 2 of which are going to be for the main body and then 2 are going to be for the lining. Same goes for the other parts. Okay, so the importance of labeling, as you can see, I'm making use of the lines that I made there. It's more of like a notch. Okay, so I'm joining those notches together, which is the A and the B. I'm joining them together. So I'm going to do that for all the 4 parts. Okay, if you watch what I'm doing, you're going to understand. It's as simple as that. So what I just did is to notch the midpoint of the C pattern, and I'm going to be joining that to the curve. So if you remember initially, I made mention that sometimes joining this part can be very tricky because you end up either shortening the fabric or you end up having excess. Okay, so either ways you can solve that by adding some few inches to that part when you're cutting, so you get rid of that shortage. Okay, so I did that in my previous part of the video. So now all my 4 parts of the cap are ready, and I'll be taking this to my ironing table so that I can iron them. And guys, let me not bored you with the importance of ironing, because I know you know that ironing is a great deal when it comes to garment construction. So whenever I hear people saying that they hate ironing, it kind of bothers me and surprises me, because ironing is like one of the most important, just as I keep on stressing on labeling. If you hate ironing, then I don't know the kind of designer or dressmaker you are, because ironing should be like part of the favorite things you should do, because it makes such a great difference. Okay, so you can actually see the difference between when it wasn't ironed and now when it was ironed. Okay, ironing is a must. It shouldn't be something you should skip. Okay, if you want to make great clothes, you want to make beautiful clothes, ironing is something that you should love. So now that I'm done, I'm going to be fixing my foam into my cap that I just stitched. And when you're doing this, you have to make sure you are stretching each side, just as I'm doing. And you're going to pin it all around. Okay, make sure you stretch it. And the importance of stretching it is to avoid any air bubbles or any left over spaces in the middle of the cap. Okay, so you just want it to lay as flat as possible, and you also have to make sure the allowances all round is 1/2 inch. Okay, so just as I've done, I'll move on to using my hemming stiff. Okay, hemming stiff or hemming gum, however you're going to call it. I'm going to be putting this inside and I'm going to iron it down so that the foam can stay on the cap. Okay, I'm just making this as one. So you're going to do that carefully. Make sure you don't burn yourself, because steam irons can really burn to the heart. Okay, so I'm carefully doing this all around, and I'll make sure the hemming stiff goes to every part. Okay, so after I'm done, I'll be doing that the other cap as well. Then I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to do the next part. Now that the two cups are set and ready, I'm going to be prepping the other two cups for the next stage. So I'll be making use of caging. I know most of you have seen this caging before. Some people just don't go with the caging, they just leave it like that, but I like to do the caging because it gives the cup more support, like it makes it more firm. So I'm just going ahead to rule my lines for the caging. Okay, so this is not anything difficult. If you watch what I'm doing, you'd see, and I'm sure you can follow it just as I've done. There are no measurement requirements to this. I just eyeball this and I go with it. Okay, so you can just follow it and you can do the same. So actually the lines that you're supposed to get on the cup varies. Okay, this is a smaller cup. This cup is, I think, size 36. Okay, but if you have a bigger cup, you're going to get more lines, obviously. So the bone that I'll be making use of is the 8 mm. You can also use the 6 mm. Okay, the reason being that this bone is actually very small and very flexible, so you can manipulate it any way you want. When you use the bigger one, it's actually very difficult to manipulate it. It's very stiff, and when it happens that way, it makes your cup some way, like it ends up making your cup flat. I have tried this before and I don't like the result, but some people use it and it works for them. I mean, you can use the bigger bone for a bigger cup size. I mean, it works, but I like to use the smaller bone because it works for me perfectly. So you can watch what I'm doing and it's quite self-explanatory. I always say that. Yeah. But in the meantime, let me see if I can actually explain whilst the video plays. So I went on with the first stitching of the bone in the middle of the seam line. Okay, so that's the first bone you are going to stitch. Then you are going to go in with the curved part after the straight line. Okay, so after you are done with that one, then you are going to be stitching the other straight line on the cup C. So there are two straight lines on the cup C. The first one at the upper part and then the second one on the seam line. Okay, so you're going to do those two lines before you end up with the final curve at the bottom. So I think that should explain it. And as you are watching, it should be, like visually clear for you to understand. Some people learn by vision. Some people also learn by vision and explaining, because only watching is not going to do enough explanation. She gets it, yes. And some people can only watch and everything goes. Some people can also learn by just listening. Even if they don't see what you are doing, they are going to understand. So everybody and how they learn. So yes, let me know if you have any questions in the comment section and I'll try my best to explain. So after coming across this caging method, I would say that it has henceforth been my favorite go-to method. I no longer use the underwear method when it comes to making of a cup corset. But I mean, everybody has their preference, so if you like to use the underwire method, you can go ahead. And then those that also like using the caging method would also use that. But yeah, that was just by the way. Also, I believe that in whatever you do, be it garment construction or baking, anything, wherever you find yourself in this work industry, I mean handwork industry, whatever you find that makes your work easy, you should go with that method, because in the end nobody really cares about the process. All they care about is the results, and the results should be 100%. So if you're getting 100% result out of a different process than whatever process everybody is going with, I think you should just go with that process that makes your work easier. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense. Okay, so it doesn't really mean or doesn't really matter if you are going through the very difficult process. Somebody can use an easier process and still get the same result. So why would you stress yourself till you get it? So now I'm going back to my ironing board to, iron what I just did, because you need to make sure everything is smooth and seamless as possible. If you don't iron, it's like it's not going to look nice. It's not going to come out great. You're not going to get the best results. So I'm just ironing the bone that I just constructed on my cap. Okay, and you are going to see the difference. Okay, so now that I'm done, I'll be stitching the main cap with the foam onto the lining, which has the caging. So your lining is going to be the part with the caging. Okay, so I'm just going ahead to pin that down and then stitch. I love pinning. I always pin my stuff. So if you don't like pinning, I think let me just leave it there. So I'll be stitching that right down, and then after I'll go ahead and do my under stitch. Okay, I think I also forgot to mention the fact that ironing your cap also helps it to shape and mold the cap. Okay, so if you iron this properly, your cap is going to come out very curvy and very smooth, and how the cap is supposed to look. So if you don't iron this, your cap is not going to form well, because the ironing helps it to mold the cap to look very curvy. So you see that people complain that after they are done constructing their cap, it ends up being flat. It's because you didn't really iron it to mold the cap to come out well. I hope what I'm saying makes sense. Okay, so as you're ironing, you're also molding the cap to look like a cap. Okay, so you can see what I have here. I'm going to be taking the ironing board again to iron for the final time. Yes, and don't forget to label. Always make sure you are labeling to avoid confusion. Yeah, so back to my ironing board. Molding this for the final time. Okay, so like I said, you always have to iron your cap. Not only does it make it look nice, seamless and smooth, it also helps it to take its shape. Okay, so you need to make sure you take the steps very serious, because these steps are actually crucial in making your garment the way it's supposed to look. Like it helps in the final results of how your garments will look. Moving on to the main body of the corset, I have the front and then the back patterns. The front piece is made up of 6 pieces of patterns, and then the back is also made up of 6 pieces. Okay, so I'll be dividing this into two, 3 of which is going to be the main fabric, and then the other 3 is going to be for the lining. Okay, so in order for me not to suffer when I'm actually working with this, I'm going to be making a running stitch all around the pattern. Okay, so a running stitch is just the longest stitch of your machine. Okay, so you just tune your dial to 5, and then you are going to stitch all around just as I'm doing. So when you're making this stitch, you have to make sure everything is lying flat. Do not stretch it when you're sewing. Just let the machine flow on the fabric, just as you can see me doing. The moment you stretch it, the fabric or the net is going to look some type of way. I don't know how to explain it, but don't stretch it. Just let it lie flat and then let the machine pass through it. All you are doing is just holding all three patterns together. Okay, you don't want to have any air bubbles or any excess, nothing. You just want everything to be flat. So I'll be repeating this same process for the lining and also for the back main fabric and then the back lining as well. So after securing everything together, it's now time for boning. Okay, so I just placed my pattern on the brown paper so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going ahead to mark my lines at the bottom part. I'm just marking 1.5 inches in between. Okay, so I'm going to be doing that. So this actually depends on the style line that you are going for. Okay, so you can use whatever measurement that suits you. So at the other upper part, I'm using 2.5 inches. Okay, so I'm going for a more slanted look. If you want your look to be straight, you can go with the measurements that suits your pattern. So it's all about preference and the style line that you actually want to use. Okay, so this is what I'm going for. So yeah. So you need to bear in mind that whatever you are doing for the left side, you need to repeat the same thing for the right. So whatever measurements that you used for your left, make sure you have that measurements in mind and you're going to repeat that same measurement. If you miscalculate anything, it's going to be obvious. It's going to show after you are done with your boning. Okay, So make sure your measurements are accurate. If it's 2 inches you're using for the left, make sure you're repeating 2 on the right. If you use 2 on the left and you use 1.5, it will obviously show. You are going to see the distance. The distance will be it will be different. Okay, yeah. Repeating the same thing for the back as well. So usually the back doesn't really have any special style line. You just go with your straight lines and then you're good to go. So now I have to prep my boning channels, okay? And what I'll be doing is I'm going to use this wrapping method. So you just fold your tulle net into two, and then you are going to measure about 6 inches. So between 5 to 6 inches. It has to be on fold, okay? And then you're going to measure the length of your corset, and then you're going to take 2 inches off. No, you take 1 inch off, sorry. So 1 inch off, half inch at the top, and then half inch at the bottom. Okay, you make sure you leave that allowance, that sewing allowance, because you don't want to cut your bone exactly as the same length. Okay, so just as you can see me doing, and then you're going to stitch your bone just at the end of the tulle net that you cut. So the tulle net is going to be on fold, and you're going to cut 6 inches. Okay, so 6 inches of tulle on fold, and it has to be on the stretchy part. You're going to cut on the stretchy part. So the horizontal part is going to be the part that is stretchy. I don't know if you get it. You know your horizontal and then your vertical lines. So when I say horizontal, I don't know. Yeah. So now that I'm done stitching that straight line, all I'll do is just wrap my bone around that tulle until it's not visible. Okay, so just do this, and then you're good to go. After you are done wrapping up, now it's time for you to do your stitching on the body of your pattern. Okay, so you carefully place it on the line that you drew, and then you're going to be stitching. So like I said, you make sure you have your half inch seam allowance at the top, and you have your half inch seam allowance at the bottom as well. So because you cut your bone before you wrap, and then you stitch on your pattern, you have to make sure these measurements are accurate, because you don't want a situation whereby the bone becomes longer than what you're supposed to stitch. When it happens that way, then it means that you have to undo what you've done and then shorten the bone. Or you don't also want to be short of your boning, the bone that you're supposed to stitch on your corset. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Just make sure the measurements that you take for the bone is accurate, okay? And then you are good to go. So just as you can see me doing, you can see that it's exactly the measurements that I took. So the excess there is just the tulle net, and I'm just going to trim that off. Okay. I'll be repeating the same process for all the channels that I've drawn on my pattern. You just need to make sure your measurements are accurate. So you make sure you take your measurements, you cut your bone. Make sure before you cut your bone, if the measurement you took is 10 inches, make sure you are taking 1 inch out of the 10. So the length of the corset is 10 inch, right? Make sure you take 1 inch before you cut that on the bone. So instead of 10 inch, you are going to cut 9 inch on the bone, and then you are going to also cut 9 inch for your net as the length, but then you're going to use 6 inches as the wrap, and in the 6 inches has to be on fold, just as I've done. Okay, so 6 inches or 5 inch, it shouldn't be anything less than that. And then you're going to wrap it around. You're first going to stitch it on your machine, and then you're going to wrap it. I hope this makes sense. So just watch what I'm doing, and then you can also follow these steps and you should get the same results. So let's take it for the last time. Just as I'm doing, you can see that I took the measurement of my bone. I've already cut my toe. I'm stitching the end of my bone on the end of my toe. I'm going to cut any excess off. After doing that, my wrapping begins. So I'm going to wrap until I get to the end of my toe. Okay, and if there are any excesses, if there is any excess, whichever one goes, you have to trim that off as well. Okay, and you remember I said you need to cut on the stretchy part. So when you cut on the stretchy part, it enables you to stretch and like adjust it to be firm and smooth all around. Okay, so after you are done, if there is any excess at the end, you can trim it off. So I think you are going to see me do that in this part of the video, so you can watch it, and then, like I said, if you follow the steps, you should be able to get the same results. So if you watch closely, at the end of my boning channel, there is this excess. Okay, I think you can see it. Yes, I'm holding it now. So I'm going to be trimming that excess off because I don't need it. Okay, so whenever you are sewing your boning channel and then there is any excess like that, you can trim it off, and then you can go ahead and then stitch that part because it's going to be under the bone, so it's not going to be visible. Okay. I've gone ahead to do majority of the channels off camera. I mean, I did it on camera, but I've edited that part out because I don't want to bore you with doing the same thing over and over again. But I want to show you this part that I'll be doing, which is a bit different from the ones that I showed you. So this is just another style line going towards the side seam of the corset. So I'm just going to repeat the same process, the lengthwise, and then the 6 inches that you are supposed to use to wrap. And then I'm going to be stitching that onto the corset before I go ahead and then stitch the last boning channel, which is meant to cover up that short boning. Okay, so if you watch it, you're going to see what I just said. So when you are wrapping, like I said, the width of your tool has to be 5 or 6 inches, nothing more, nothing less. If you use something less, your bone is still going to be visible, and you don't want that. If you use more, when you are wrapping, the bone is going to be too thick. You also don't want that. So we just want something very moderate. Okay, something that is just going to balance the look of your corset. So after boning all the channels, this next step is also very important. So I'm going to be stitching my bone on this part of the corset as well. The bone is going to be very small, but this is what we call small but mighty. And the purpose of this is to give that part of the corset a structure, is to make it firm. Okay, it keeps that place very firm and solid. So that's just the purpose for keeping or stitching a bone there. Okay. After you are done, you should have something looking like this, and then voila, you're almost through with your front. But then you need to stitch your lining and then attach your cups. Okay, so with the lining, you can either go with the traditional way of using our lining to turn the wrong side or the rough side inside, or you can just stitch your lining right on top of your main fabric. That's if you don't want your bone channels to show. Okay, so you can watch what I'm doing and then you are going to understand. But with this method, I'll be using the traditional way where you're going to use right side facing right side, and then you're going to stitch your seam allowance and then flip it over. Okay, because I want my boning channels to show. So after I'm done, I'm just going to flip my lining over. So if it was the normal fabric, I would have done an understitch. Okay, but with this, I'm just going to do a top stitch instead, because I want the two nets to stay together. So I'm pinning that down so it can enable me to, stitch everything together. So you're going to be stitching all around your corset so your lining and then the main fabric can stay together as one. So that's what I'm doing here, just stitching everything together. So after you are done, you should make sure you are trimming out any excess tulle net that is popping out. Okay, because you don't want to have any bulkiness, or you don't want to have to deal with any excesses showing up, because this is tulle and you want it to look as seamless as possible. Okay. So after you are done, you should have something looking like this, very neat and clean. And then you can move on to the back. So with the back, I've already done my boning channels off camera. I use the same method as the front for the back. So now I'm moving on to my eyelet panel. Is that what you call it? And if you see that your bone is coiling off like this and you're not comfortable with it, you can iron it so that it can stay straight. So with this, what I do is I interface both the lining and then the main fabric. So with this, you're going to cut 4 as well, 2 of which is going to be the main fabric, and then the other 2 is going to be the lining. Okay, so we are going to be boning this part for our eyelet. So the first thing to do is, you can see that I've labeled the upper part T, which is the top, and then the right side is CB. CB is center back. So that's where we are going to be making our first bone channel. Okay, and you're going to leave about a 1/4 inch from the edge that I've labeled CB. You always make sure to secure the ends of your bone as well. So I use this method. I use the masking tape method. You can use whatever method that works for you. So I left about 1/4 to 1/2 inch at the CB area, and I'm going to be stitching my bone there. So after I'm done stitching this bone, I'll leave about 1/2 inch in between, and I'm going to stitch another bone there. Okay, I've seen methods where people stitch about 3 or 4 bones on the entire panel, but I've not tried that method before. If that method works for you, you can go with that, but this is the method that I use that works for me. So after I'm done with the boning, I go ahead and then pick up my lining part of the fabric, and I'm going to be stitching the upper part. Okay, so right side to right side, and I'm going to stitch that. After, I'm going to make an understitch on the lining part. So the part that has the boning is my main fabric. If you don't want your boning to show, you can use the boning part as your lining. Okay, so after I'm done, I'll just go ahead and then stitch the end part, the CB. Okay, then I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to sandwich that in between my tulle net. Okay, so I'll be doing that shortly, so you can watch it and then you're going to understand. So here, what I'm doing is I'm doing a top stitch, okay, at the part where I did the bone, so that I can make the channel more visible. Okay, so I'll be doing that to the second channel as well. It kind of gives it a very good look after you insert your plastic bone inside. Okay, before I sandwich the back parts into the eyelet channel, I have to make sure I'm finishing the raw ends of the back part of the corset. So that's what I'm doing. I'm finishing the raw ends by using the lining to flip it over. So like I said, right side to right side, and then that gives you a good finishing. Some people also use bias to do this finishing. All depends on the kind of look and finishing that you want to go for, and any of these works. Okay, so I like to use this method. There are times that I also use the bias method, so whatever works for you, you can go with that. So now that I'm done, I'm just making sure that they are all behaving as one fabric and not moving anywhere. So I'm going to be stitching all around this to ensure that it doesn't shift. Okay. I'm gonna head to do the same thing to the other part of the back, and guys, just look at that. I bent my tool while I was ironing, so you have to be very careful when you're ironing too, because it can actually show you shege when you least expect it. So now I have to sandwich the tool part into the eyelet panel. Okay, so to do this, I'm just going to face the right side of my tool to the right side of the eyelet panel, which is the fabric, the crepe fabric. Okay, so this is very simple. I'm just going to pin that down first, and then I'm going to stitch. So when you watch what I'm doing, you are going to see and understand. So it's just right side facing each other. So I'm going to stitch that down, and then you can watch the next steps. So now we are left with the lining part. Okay, so we are just going to fold this inside carefully, pin it down, and then stitch. So bear in mind, with the right side that I said it will be facing each other, this is just for the main fabrics. Okay, so remember, we have the main fabric of the tulle net, which has the boning, and then we also have the main fabric of our eyelet panel, which also has the boning. Okay, so if you follow these steps just as I've done, you should also have the same thing. So what I'm doing is I'm just flipping the raw ends inside, and I'm going to stop stitch on this. Okay, I hope this is clear. So after you are done, you should have something very neat and nice. And I'm also going to create another channel inside where I'll put a bone to give it more structure, or to make it more firm. Okay, so this is all about the sandwiching. If there's any other method that you know of, you can go with that, but this is the method that I usually use, and it helps a lot because this finishing ensures that, you know, like the raw ends are not seen. Okay, because this is a sheer fabric, you don't want to do any knitting or overlocking or anything. It's going to be visible, and it won't make your work look neat. So now I've done both sides, and I'm ready to fix my cap to the front of my corset. So I'll be doing that in a minute. Okay, so to do this, like I said, you have to pin. So what I'll be doing is I'll be pinning just one side of my cap to the main body of my front section. So I'll make sure that I pin this all around. Okay, you have to make sure that the hole for the main body is the same as the circumference of your cap, if that makes sense. You should make sure that it matches. If it doesn't match, then it means that you have to go back to your main body and then trim that space just a little. Okay, not too much, because you don't want that space to be too big, which cannot accommodate your cap. And you also have to make sure it's not too tight, which will also not be able to accommodate the cap. So you can see a pin just pricked me, and it was so painful. Even though I have forgotten about it, I just saw the video and it reminded me. But anyways, we get pricked all the time, so the pins are now like our friends. So you should have something looking like this, and then you can keep it under your machine and stitch. So this part is very tricky, it's very difficult, sometimes very difficult. You need to take your time. You also need to relax, and then you can achieve this seamlessly. You cannot sew corset when you are in a rush. You can't sew corset like so. You just need to be at peace. You should be in the best state of mind. You should be in the best mood to be able to do this, because if you want to rush this, you're going to make a lot of mistakes which you don't want. So because of the boning, it makes it difficult to turn the corset around freely. Okay, so you need to be doing a lot of pivoting and turning and manipulating and doing so many things to be able to achieve this effectively or successfully. So if this is going to be a problem, you can hand stitch this down before going in with your machine. Okay, whatever works for you, you can use that, right? So after I'm done, I'm now going to fold the lining part of the cap inside. So it's just like sandwiching the end parts of my corset in between the caps. Okay, it's very simple. So the first thing you need to do is to stitch just one part of your cap to the main body of your corset. After you are done, then you come in with your lining and then turn it over. So this is just a method of finishing the raw ends of your corset, because you don't want it to be visible. Okay, and I love the finishing it gives. It looks so neat, and that is what every client wants on their dress. Okay, I've gone ahead to stitch the other cap as well. So now it's time to join the side seams of the front to the side seams of the back, and I'll be doing it just like so. First off, I'm going to be pinning this to secure every part down before I go ahead with my machine to stitch. I'm working with tool, so I don't want to make any mistakes, because the moment you make a mistake on tool, it's game over, because unraveling this is definitely going to tear your tool, because it's net. Okay, so no matter how careful you are, there's definitely going to be a pinch of hole somewhere, and you don't want that to happen. Okay, so this is what my corset looks like so far. So I'll be using 1/2 inch seam allowance for this, just in case I didn't mention, but I think during the drafting process I made mention that the seam allowances all round is going to be 1/2 inch, so I'm making use of that 1/2 inch here. So I'm sewing the other part as well, and we are almost done with our corset. So after stitching, what I'll do next is to trim down the excess seam allowances because I don't need them. I'll be finishing the sides of my garment as well, but I'll be doing that after I insert my plastic bone into the channels that I've created. So the purpose of this plastic bone is to give your bone more structure because your ringling bone is very soft and it can't stand on its own. So working with corset for the past years, I realized that when you use only the ridgeline bone, your corset ends up bending. Okay, the bone breaks inside the corset. But when you add on the plastic bone to the ridgeline bone, it gives it more strength, it gives it more structure, and they can both stand firmly without any distraction. Okay, so when I say distraction, what I mean is it doesn't bend. Okay, because now it's more stronger. I hope this makes sense. Yeah. So you realize that I'm unpicking some threads at the bottom of my corset. This is because of the stitching that I made to bring my lining and my main fabric together to join them as one. So I'm just unpicking that section so that I can be able to insert my plastic bone in between the channel. Okay, so I'm just doing so, and then I'm just cutting off the corners of my plastic bone so that it doesn't pierce or it doesn't go through the fabric. Okay, so you just make sure the ends of your plastic bone are smooth as possible. So you can use fire to bend the edges, or you can also use a nail file to smoothing out the edge, but I'm just using the method where I just cut off the edge with my scissors. Either ways, they all work. So I'm done inserting my plastic bone in between all the channels, and this is what my corset is looking like now, guys. If you have reached this stage, you should be excited because the corset is coming to life. I mean, one thing is when you are sewing a dress and everything is moving smoothly, no mistakes, nothing, it makes you so happy. Okay, nobody wants to make a mistake while they are sewing. So now the next thing to do is to cut about 2 inches of my tool. Again, I'm going to be using this to do my finishing of the side seams, and also I'm going to use that same tool to finish the end of my corset. Okay, so I cut 2 inches. I make sure I cut 2 of that just to make it more firm or more thicker. You can go ahead and use bias, but I'm using net because I don't want it to show in my corset, because you know my corset is a bit transparent, so I don't want it to be visible. Okay, that is why I'm using tool net. So what I'm doing here is just piping. Okay, I'm just stitching my the strip of net that I cut. I'm just stitching it along the raw ends of my side seam, and then I'm just going to flip that over and then stitch on it. Okay, it's just as simple as that. I think this seam finishing is called I think I've forgotten, but it's a method of finishing your garment. It's a seam finishing method. So if you know your seam finishings, this should be one of the methods. Okay, so I'm just going to flip that and then I'll stitch on it. But first off, I'm just pinning that down before I do my stitching, because I want everything to be perfect when it's time for me to stitch. Yeah. So after I'm done pinning, I'm just going ahead to top stitch on this, like I said before. So I like to use this method because I don't want any boning on my side seams, because I don't know, I feel like they are not necessary, and they even restrict the snatching of the waist. But I see some corsets with bone, which is fine. It's all about preference. Sometimes I bone my side seams as well, but all depends on the style line, like I said, and it's all about preference as well. But with this type of corset, I don't bone my side seams. So if you want to bone your side seams, you can go ahead and do that, and you wouldn't have to go through the process of doing all this seam finishings. Okay, so now we are moving on to the last part of the corset making, which is finishing the hem part of the corset. So just like the same thing that I did for the side seams, I'm going to be using 2 inches on fold. So let's say you're going to cut 4 inches. Okay, the width of your tool is going to be 4 inches, and you're going to cut on the stretchy part. The length of your tool is going to be on the stretchy part, okay, because you are going to be maneuvering and manipulating and turning it along the edge of your corset. Okay, so you need that stretchy part so that you can be able to do that. So that's what I'm doing now, and the reason why I use the tool net is because it's lightweight, and because this corset is going to be inbuilt, sometimes the line of the edge of the corset shows in the dress or in your skirt. I'll try and see if I can put an image there for you to see. Some clients complain about that line, but I mean, it's an inbuilt corset, so that line will obviously show. So that line always shows because of the type of finishing we do at the hem of the corset. So I hope this makes sense, because you want the hem to be as thin as possible. So if your finishing around the hem is thick, that line is definitely going to show. So I have the image on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. Most clients complain about it when they come for fitting. They're like, is this line going to be there? Can you do something about the line? And then you're like, it's an inbuilt corset, but I think this is a way to reduce that line. Yeah. The next thing to do is my understitch, which I've already started. So I'm going to be stitching this all around, and then I'm taking this to my ironing table to press it down and make sure everything lies flat. And then I'm going to be hand stitching this. Because of my plastic bone, I won't be able to stitch this on the machine. Okay, so yeah. So I'm done ironing. Now it's time to hand stitch. So I'm going to be flipping this over twice to make it as thin as possible, and then I'll go in with my hand stitching. Okay, so with the hand stitching, I'll be using the invisible method so that my finishing at the end is going to be as neat as possible. Not everybody wants to see threads going in and out of their dresses. Okay, so you just need to make sure this is as neat as possible. Okay, so I'm just pinning it down first, like I always do, before I go ahead and complete it with my hand stitching. So the hand stitching took me forever, but in the end I was able to finish, and that is what matters. One thing about sewing is the most difficult ones are the ones that gives you the best results. So you need to take your time and finish up whatever necessary thing you are supposed to do, because there are no shortcuts when it comes to sewing. This is what it looks like after I flipped it over. I'm yet to do my hand stitching, but this is just the pinning that I have done. So I just wanted you to look at what it looks like, and it already looks nice and neat. This is what you should have. Okay, so I'm just going to be hand stitching this quickly, then I'm going to get back with the rest of my video. After I'm done with the hand stitching, the next thing to do is to punch my holes for my eyelets. Okay, and here I'll be making use of some measurements. So the first measurement that I'll be taking is 1/2 inch from the top of my corset. The next measurement is going to be 1.5, so it's going to be 1.5 interval throughout. You can use whatever measurement you want for your intervals. It can be 1 inch, it can be 1/2 inch, but it shouldn't be more than 1.5. 2 inch. When you use 2 inch, the holes become too, like spacious, and it doesn't look good. But if you want to use 2 inches, that's totally fine. So here what I do is I punch the holes one at a time. Okay, you have to make sure the hole is like hot and it's going to accommodate your eye. Okay, but when you punch all the holes and then you come back to insert the eye, it actually becomes hard because you're working with the material. The moment you punch the hole, the ends of the material become hard. So this is actually something that I do that works for me. So you can also try this method and let me know how it works. I've seen methods whereby people use they actually bone the entire the placket or the panel. Okay, and then they punch the holes. I learned it works, but I haven't tried that method yet. So if that method works for you, you can go with that. But this is how I do mine, and it works perfectly. So after I'm done punching the holes for one side, I'm going to join that together like so and pin it together, and I'm going to just mark the other sides with my soldering iron. Mind you, I'm not punching the hole, I'm just marking it so I can get the same measurement as the other side. So now I'm going in to punch the holes and then do it just as I explained earlier on. Okay, so this works for me, and I'm done with the final punch, and this is what it looks like. Very nice and neat. You should have something like this as well if you follow my steps. So if you use 1 inch, means you're going to have more holes. If you use 1/2 inch, you're going to have more holes, which are going to be closely packed. Okay, if you use 2 inches, then it means you're going to have less holes and they are going to be very spacious. Okay, so moving on to the next part, I mentioned earlier on that my corset is going to have a yoke. So you see this type of tulle net, they call it body net. It looks like it has a shiny surface. That's the type of net you want to use. Some people call it HD net, but I know it's body net, and it comes in different body tone colors. Okay, so you find the one that is in your shade and then you go with that. I'm just trying to show you what it looks like, but this is obviously not my shade. This is for a light-skinned person, so I think this is my shade, and you see how it blends perfectly with my skin. So I'm just trying to show you guys what it looks like. So the net kind of has the holes in it are kind of they're slightly bigger than the normal body net that you see in the market, and the surface is also shiny. So when you see anything like that, I think you should just go for that. And in Ghana, I think a yard is 25 cedis, between 20 to 25 cedis. So you can ask anyone who sells this kind of body nets, and then you can get it from them. It blends perfectly with your skin. So here I folded my tulle net into 4, okay, because I need 2 pieces. One is going to serve as the main fabric and the one is going to serve as the lining, because I want to finish up the raw edges of my neckline and then my sleeve. Upon cutting my yoke on my body net, I realized I didn't really need a sleeve, so I turned this yoke into a drop shoulder. Okay, so I just extended my shoulder line by I think 4 to 5 inches, and then I joined it to my armhole. Okay, so that's just what I'm doing. I'm just going in with my free hand to do that. So I'm just doing a drop shoulder sleeve, okay, and I'm going in by half an inch so I can blend it, so that after I'm done stitching I wouldn't have any pointy edges. Okay, so it's just as simple as that. Okay. So after cutting, I folded my body net into 4 again, and I'm going to be repeating the same thing I did for the front for the back pattern as well. So I'm going to extend my shoulder line by 4 inches or 5, I don't remember, but I think between 4 or 5 inches, and then I'm going to connect it back to my armhole. Okay, and then on the shoulder line I come down by 1 inch and I blend it back to the shoulder. So just as you can see me doing, is very simple. So that's the drop shoulder. So this is just a freehand method. Then I cut all around using 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay. So I did my cutting on the stretchy part of my body net. Okay, so the circumference part of my measurements is on the stretchy part, if that makes sense. So I just did a double check to see if my measurements are aligned, and here I just took a little snag break because why not. So I'm now about to stitch my tulle or my body net. So I have 2 pieces of this, the front, and I also have 2 pieces of the back as well. So I'll be stitching the front and the back together, and I'll stitch the other front and back together. So what I'm doing is I'm treating one as the main fabric and I'm treating one as the lining, pardon me. So if you watch what I'm doing, you're going to understand. So what I'm doing now is just aligning the shoulder together, and I'm going to be stitching that. Okay, and I'll do the same thing for the other set, then we move on to the next stage. So after stitching all the shoulder lines together, you can see that I trim off the excess, and now I'm going ahead to align the neckline together, and I'm going to be stitching that of the back towards the front. So I'm going to stitch all around just like you can see. So I'll be stitching the end of my drop shoulder as well, because this is almost serving like a sleeve. So yeah, I'm stitching the ends of the sleeve because I want to finish that part, and then I also went ahead to trim out all the excess down to like a 1/4 inch. Okay, so after I'm done, I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to iron. Usually what I do is sometimes I top stitch all around. Okay, but this time around I just went ahead and I did some ironing. And then one thing that I also do is I always like to stitch the shoulders together, because now you can see that the shoulders are apart. Okay, so I stitch them together so they become one. So after I think we are done with our corset, and this is the type of ribbon that I usually use for my clients. It's called cross grain ribbon, so you can search for it in the market. And this is me here trying on my corset to see how it fits, and it fits perfectly. It's so comfortable. You can see that I'm not suffocating. My waist is perfectly fine. Okay, I didn't snatch it too much. So here what I'm trying to do is to pin or drape my yoke on my corset. Okay, so with the help of someone, you can do this either on yourself or on your mannequin, but I prefer doing this on myself because it gives me the perfect fit that I'm looking for. So I'm quickly doing this and I'm going to show you what it looks like. So I'm done pinning, and look at how that mesh looks so perfect on my skin. I mean, if I don't tell you there's a net there, you're not going to see it, or I did lie. But I think it looks so good, and I'm going to be doing some beading on this entire dress. And you can see that little victory dance. That should tell you that I'm actually happy with my work. And that is every designer's dream, to actually make a beautiful dress that perfectly fits the client or herself, okay, without any mistake, without any trouble. This brings us to the end of my tutorial. If you made it this far, I hope you learned something new. I hope you learned and unlearned something. Okay, if you have any questions, you have any suggestions, kindly leave them in the comment section and I'll be right there to attend to you. This is what the dress looks like on my dress form. Very perfect. And I'm actually planning to use this for my birthday shoot. So you guys should watch out and make sure you're following me on my Instagram or Facebook and TikTok. I'm going to see you guys in my next tutorial, which will be very soon. I love you guys, and I'm going to see you in my next one. Bye.